My name's Jason, and today I'm really excited to give you an intro to accessibility first. Today I'm also joined by Andrew. Andrew, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, I'm Andrew. I'm a developer consultant at Bitovi, and I'm Chasen's right-hand man for this accessibility training today. Back to you, Chasen.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. So my name's Chasen. That's Chase with an N. I've been with Bitovi. I am going to hit 9 years in February, which is kind of crazy to me. So over my 9 years of experience, I've been in a bunch of roles from doing front-end developer, back-end developer, as technical product owner, doing open source developer relations, working on a handful of accessibility audit and remediation projects. Today, what we're going to cover is we're going to have a brief discussion about what is accessibility. We're going to talk about different types of disabilities and kind of how they can be permanent, temporary, or situational in nature. We're going to talk about how accessibility benefits everyone, right? It's not just for people who have permanent disabilities. Accessibility is for everyone. And then this is going to be the heart of our workshop today. So we're going to go through the principles of accessible web design and development. We're going to get some hands-on time with HTML and CSS with just a little bit of JavaScript. And then we're going to close out talking about why incorporating accessibility earlier in your process, like shifting left in your process and having it be through your entire development process, is valuable. Okay, so what is accessibility? So I think of accessibility as making sure that our digital products, our services, our tools, the technologies that we build are usable by everyone. Regardless of their abilities or disabilities or level of technical ability or not, or the technology they have available to them or not, right? And I'm going to say like accessibility over and over and over today, but as much as I love the term, I think a better term is user-centered design. User-centered design. So what does that mean? User-centered design is taking into consideration someone's needs, their preferences, and circumstances. To me, it's not just about like for needs that can mean having a physical or like cognitive need, but also for preferences, right? I think of things like things being easier to read if you're using dark mode, or the opposite, things being easier to read when you're using light mode, or reducing transparency, reducing motion, these sort of preferences. And then circumstances, I think of this next line of performance and device capability. So if you only have a mobile phone, which is a large percentage of users that are using our services. I know my boyfriend primarily, he has a computer, but he primarily does everything on his phone, right? So his device capability changes. It's a smaller screen. Maybe he's doing stuff not connected to good internet, right? Even though this isn't what you think of as accessibility, maybe, I think this totally falls under user-centered design and putting our users and our customers first. I wish we had the time to go through this today, but usability testing is such a core part of understanding our customers and building for them. So I wish we had time to dig into this today, but we don't. But I just want to put it out there. When we talk about accessibility, when we talk about user-centered design, it all needs to be rooted in us actually testing with our users, right? Not testing our users, but testing our designs and our prototypes, our mockups, testing our sites with our users. Okay, so today we're gonna do a lot of HTML and CSS in our exercises, but you're gonna hear me say WCAG. Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The WCAG is a set of success criteria. It's dozens of different criteria that say, okay, you need to do this, this, and this for your sites or your product to be accessible. So we're not going to cover specific WCAG criteria today, but I want you to know that everything that we talk about is founded on the success criteria that's in WCAG. So when you hear me say WCAG, now you know what it means. Let's start talking about some types of disability. I want to group types of disabilities into 3 buckets. So first, we're going to talk about permanent disabilities. I'm going to go through each one of these. So for vision, so Vision disabilities can include blindness or low vision or color blindness. On color blindness, I think it's like 10% of men have color blindness, and it's a lower percentage for women. Move on to our next one. So hearing. Hearing includes deafness, hard of hearing, tinnitus. If you have like a constant tone that you're always hearing like a ringing in your ear, that's tinnitus. Motor. So the big ones I think of are like quadriplegia or cerebral palsy, but really any motor disability where you might not have fine-grained control of your hands or anything else. And then cognitive. It can be very invisible, the cognitive disabilities like autism or dyslexia or ADHD, right? My second bucket is temporary disabilities. So they're the same as where we just went through permanent, but the temporary nature, and the idea is that one day the user isn't going to be impaired, right? So for vision, that can include like an eye injury or a migraine or an infection. For hearing, that can include like being exposed to a loud noise. For mobility, that can include like hand and arm injuries. In my family, some folks have arthritis, and sometimes it's completely fine. You know, they have the disability, but they only have flare-ups every once in a while, so it's kind of temporary in nature. And then cognitive can include insomnia or being on medications that are affecting your sleep or your cognitive ability. And then the third bucket that I'm going to talk about is situational disabilities. Same outcomes as the permanent disabilities, but they're dependent on some circumstances. So for vision, that can be like, hey, if you're in bright sunlight, you're not going to be able to see your screen as well. Or if you're in low light conditions, you're probably going to want to have the screen brightness be real low or want lower contrast. Or you have glasses, but you don't have them at that moment. Hearing, noisy environment, right? Situational. We can all be in a noisy environment, right? Or if you have hearing aids, if you're without them. Mobility, carrying things in a moving vehicle. I love this one because I think we've all been in a car on a bumpy road, or we've been on like a bus or something, and you know, the ground isn't so great. So if we're trying to like use our phones or use some other device, that can mean that we lose our fine-grained motor control, right? So being in a moving vehicle and not having fine-grained motor control, that's situational for all of us, and is a reminder of the permanent disability. And then cognitive, right? We can all be distracted, right? We can all have you know, kids who are playing or screaming. We can all have a neighbor with a dog that is barking. We can all just not get the best sleep last night and be a little bit fatigued or sick. This is something, you know, these are something that can affect all of us. So I want to talk about how accessibility is important in other ways too. Ethical. So ethical responsibilities. I think as people who build products, who build services, that we have an ethical responsibility to enable equal access to everything that we build, and that's part of our human rights, right? And so for me, the ethical responsibility is being inclusive to enable everyone to participate fully in our society. I really think I think this is the kind of happy way to think about it, in terms of if we're building accessible products and services, we're enabling people to fully participate in our society. I don't think we should, I think people should be able to fully participate in our society regardless. And accessibility, and thinking about accessibility and building it into our products and services, is how we enable that for everyone, right? Not just people with disabilities. Okay, so maybe you don't care about the ethics. That's fine. Let me sell you on the business index, right? So you'll notice like I'm not focusing, well, I guess I did mention color blindness and the percentage there, but mostly I'm not focusing on the exact number, exact percentage of users who have specific types of disabilities. I could mention things like in the United States, I think it's 20% of folks have some sort of permanent disability. I don't want to focus on those specific numbers because accessibility affects everyone. That said, I don't think that any business will want to just say like, oh, we're okay with saying X number of our users, they can't give us money, right? Like what business wants to say, oh, we're fine with Y% less of revenue and profit every year. I don't think any business really wants to do that, right? So making sure that our stuff is accessible and available to as many users as possible, I think has a real impact on the bottom line. And if I didn't convince you with that one, I'm gonna try and close out with the legal requirement, right? So in the United States, in 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. The ADA is focused a lot on the requirement for equal access and is commonly understood to be for physical spaces, right? Buildings having to, like new buildings having to have things like wheelchair ramps or buildings needing to be retrofitted for that. But it also applies to websites and digital services as well. In court, it's very clear cut that any services or products that are made available with public funding or are government related have to follow the ADA and follow the WCAG criteria. There's also a strong legal cases for that applying to every website as well, anything made available to the public, which I think makes sense, right? If it's made available to the public, it should be accessible for everyone to access. So at the bottom line, there's a legal requirement there too. Let's get into the meat of it. So we're going to talk about the principles of accessible web design and development. Right now, I want to kick off talking about clear language. Clear language means writing as plain language as possible, right? And that makes our content more accessible. Sometimes people think of things writing in terms of the language level or the reading level of something. I think roughly like a 9th grade reading level or lower is what folks aim for. Because if writing is complex, it can be confusing, it can be hard to understand. So writing in as plain language as possible can increase your engagement, it can increase your SEO, it can make things easier to navigate, and it benefits everyone, right? So it benefits folks with, like writing clearly, benefits folks with cognitive impairments, it benefits folks who are non-native speakers, really like it benefits everyone to write clearly. So let's talk about some techniques. Write as clearly as possible, right? Avoid double negatives. I have to say, I was on a website the other day and I was very annoyed with a sign-up form where at the bottom it had 2 checkboxes. And they clearly did this to trick you, right? So it had 2 checkboxes for like, opting in or opting out of a mailing list or email form, right? And the top one was worded in a way, was like worded in a negative. So you wanted to not check that one. And then the second one was worded as a double negative. So you did want to check that one if you wanted to opt out of stuff, right? Really confusing, hard to understand, obviously there to try and trick people. Avoiding double negatives and that sort of thing is what we want to do. How do we do this, right? So in HTML, we can use semantic elements to mark up text, right? Obviously, we need to write our text clearly and avoid double negatives, but we can also add some semantics to our text. We're not going to go through all of these today. I just want people to be aware, like, hey, there's all these elements that you can use to add semantic meaning to your text, which can be used by assistive technologies and are also great hooks for styling stuff, right? So not everything has to be a span with a class on it. There's a bunch of different HTML elements that you can use to mark up your text. Hopefully this, we're not going to go through all of these, so hopefully this inspires you to look up like, oh, what more semantic elements can I use in my HTML? Next, I want to talk about text size, color, and contrast. All three of these are related. So first, I'm going to talk about legibility, which means making text more readable, right? Legibility is actually being able to like read the characters, see the characters, and understand them. Adaptability, allowing the text to be resized. So this one is has been really important to me recently. I gave a training a couple months ago, and I mentioned like, hey, I use bumping up the text size all the time now, and I kind of thought it was just a function of like, as you age, things start to degrade slightly. Then I got my eyes checked, and I was diagnosed with an eye disease called keratoconus. And then I realized like, oh, okay, so this is like my vision is degrading, and me wanting to bump up the text size of things, or now I just set the default, like the minimum font size in my browser to something that's higher than the default, right? I think like the default's 16 and I have mine bumped up to 18 or whatever. So adaptability is allowing the text to be resized. I think WCAG says something like, I think the AA standard is at least being able to increase by at least 200%, and then AAA is 300 or 400% or something like that. So being able to bump up your text size, either your default text size or hitting Command plus to increase the text size of the page. And then reflow. So when I say reflow, I mean not requiring horizontal scrolling to read text. So in left to right language like English or other right to left languages, we want to avoid horizontal scrolling. I think the defaults that we have when we're navigating are kind of clear. Like for our language, if we don't have horizontal scrolling, we're going down page vertically. And the browser makes it really easy to do that, right? Like we can hit the space bar to go down by sections of the page. There's not as easy affordances for doing the same thing horizontally. Of course, you can scroll horizontally. You might be able to use certain key commands to be able to scroll horizontally, but it certainly isn't as easy as just scrolling down vertically. Someone asked me recently, like, okay, does that mean like all horizontal scrolling is bad? I think the answer is no. Like for like an image carousel, maybe you have something that is scrolling horizontally. But usually with those sort of things, you build in more affordances, right? You have like buttons that you can go left or right, or you build in a keyboard nav for being to use the left and right arrow keys to be able to kind of scroll more easily. So I think there are places where it's appropriate and you can build in more affordances to make it easier. But by default, especially for text, we want to just be scrolling vertically. Okay, so techniques. So text size. I would say that for your text, you want one rem or higher to scale, right? Your headings are going to be larger. Other elements are going to be larger. But as your base font size, you want at least one rem. You can go higher, that's fine, but I think your minimum is one rem. We're not going to get into the details of it today because there's a lot of details, but you're going to see that I specifically suggest rem, and you'll see that in the exercises too. So one rem means whatever the one rem is relative to whatever the base font size is in your browser. So I think by default, that means 16 pixels. For someone like me who has my base font size increased to 18 pixels or higher, that means one rem is just going to map to whatever that base font size is. So I think it's a really good foundation. Like if you use a rem, it'll be relative to what the user has set, and you can scale from there. Line heights. So 1.5, I think, again, this is a great base. You can go higher if it makes sense. Maybe not too high, because then you start getting separation between the content and it's harder to track. but as a base, I think 1.5 for a line height is good. And I'm specifically calling out no units. When you don't specify units for line height, it'll be relative to whatever the font size is. If I specify 1 rem and I specify 1.5 for the line height, it'll look at the rem and know, okay, my line height is going to be 1.5 rem. Color, don't rely on it. Use color. Color's great, right? I think we need more color in the world, says the man that's in a mostly white room, but I think we need more color in the room, right? But yeah, so color, we need more of it, but don't rely on it, right? So what I'm saying here is it's great to use color for, like, if you've got an error message and you want to make the text red, or you want to have the like indicator around it be red, or kind of communicating that like negative error state with color, that's fine. It needs to be backed up by something visual, right? So it can't just be red, but there needs to be some other indicator. It can be an icon, it can be something in the text. There just has to be some other indicator to convey the same information. The reason for that is going back to color blindness. There's lots of different types of color blindness. The red-green color blindness, where you're not going to be able to see red. So if that's the only way that information is being conveyed, then you're totally going to miss out on understanding what's going on. Color, use it, but don't rely on it to convey information. And then contrast, technical like WCAG recommendations for contrast. So a minimum is a 4.5 to 1 ratio. Now, please don't ask me like how these ratios are calculated, because I do not know how the math works behind it. But any tool that deals with color, or in your browser dev tools, you can see the color contrast between the like foreground text and the background color. So it's the ratio of that foreground text to that background color for a larger type, right? If you're increasing the size of your headings, then for large type, you can get away with a 3-to-1 ratio, a smaller ratio, smaller contrast. Why is that? The larger the text is, the easier it's going to be able to see, which means it can have less contrast with the background color. These are the minimums for, I think, AA in WCAG. It's great to have higher contrast, right? That's going to make it a lot easier for you to read your text. And I was talking to someone yesterday, and they mentioned that the highest ratio of like a pure white and black is a 22-to-1 ratio, right? So these minimums are pretty low in the grand scale of like, hey, black on white or white on black is a full 22-to-1. So lots of room for you to have higher contrast in your designs. It's our first exercise. In this panel on the left, we have our HTML and CSS just all in one file, because it's easier to deal with that way. And then on our right-hand side, we're going to see a preview of the browser. It even has a URL, so you can copy and paste this, or you can click there, open a new window, and it'll take the code that you have and put it into a new window. Let me walk you through what we have in this exercise. So I've got some styles up here. We are going to touch the styles, so feel free to modify these. Then at the top, I've got my H1. We're going to go through this comment in just a little bit. This kind of outlines, hey, here are the things that we're going to fix as part of this exercise. Okay, let's get into the meat of it. So I've got this form element. It's got an email address that is required. It's got a name field, which is not required. So we've got the markup for that. Then down here, I've got a blue box with text that I absolutely cannot read. Got some header text and some paragraph text. Can't read that. I've got this, I've got an X on a green background that I can read a little bit better than the blue, but it's still not great for me. Then down here, I've got quotes from Wikipedia, and I've got some very long text that is scrolling all the way to the right here. And has anyone seen, like there's a YouTube video of a guy somewhere in the UK that is pronouncing the name of this Welsh town. That like this is the like full name of the town, and it's like absolutely crazy to pronounce. Has anyone else seen that video? So anyway, so I've got a little quote about this town, but it scrolls all the way to the right here. It scrolls, it makes our whole page scroll horizontally, which is not great. Okay, so for this exercise, we're going to do 4 things. So the first part is we want to do this. Don't rely on color to convey information. So in this form, we're using color to convey information. We want to fix that. The second part is to fix the text colors to provide enough contrast. So in this blue section, we want to leave the blue, but we want to fix the text colors so that there's enough contrast. Our third part is we want to fix the text size here to provide enough contrast. So we can leave the colors as is, but when we make changes to the text size, we can meet the minimum contrast. And then our fourth part, avoid horizontal scrolling. We want to look at what's going on with this quote and figure out how can we make sure there's no horizontal scrolling and it all displays vertically in line. I want to point out some pretty cool dev tools. These are available. I'm using Firefox today. These are available in Chrome, Safari, Edge, Opera, all the browsers have these tools. So I'm going to open up the exercise in a new tab, and then I'm going to, on the Mac, I'm going to hit Command Option I. I think somewhere in the navigation is bringing up the DevTools. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bump up the text size of this. And then you'll see in the browser DevTools, there's a bunch of different tabs. And over here, I've got an accessibility tab built into Firefox. And then it's got a check for issues little option. So when I can choose specific ones, but I'm just going to do all issues. What I love about this is, now granted, automated tooling can only check for certain things, but something it can very easily check for is color contrast, right? With all of the text rendered on the page, it can look at the color of the text against the background that it's on, and it can point out like, hey, this text does not have enough contrast. So you'll notice here on the right, and let me see if I can bump this up a little bit more. So you'll see on the right that it tells me that like this text does not meet the WCAG standards. So you'll notice it gives me the ratio here, right? It gives me the ratio that this black on blue is only a 1.85, which we want to meet a 3:1 ratio for header text. And then this paragraph text down here, it also tells me like it's a 2.2 when it should be at least a 4.5 to 1. That's how we can kind of check like, hey, are we meeting the minimum contrast? It also points out down here that the contrast doesn't meet the minimum. This one we're going to fix by increasing the text size, and then this issue should go away. Don't rely on color to convey information. Does anyone want to coach me through what they did for this one?
Yeah, sure. You can use a little red star. That's a classic solution. So I just changed the text to say that it's marked with the red that the required fields are marked with a red star, and then changed the added a star to the email.
Okay, yes, I love this. So this required class was giving this label red styles. So like you can change the text to say like, hey, there's going to be a red star, and just add that to the field. That's a pretty common thing to have. Like starred fields be the ones that are required. So this is great. This is a solution. If you did something like this, that's great too, where maybe you just explicitly added like the required text to the field, especially if it's a short field like this where there's only a few fields, adding some required text. All right, for number 2, fix the text colors to provide enough contrast. This is where I really wish I'm going to reload this, where it pains me not to be able to do the after the fact, like double check that the styles look good. I know I can just add the styles in Firefox, so I'm gonna just do that for right now. So if I check for issues, I do get the minimum ratio is broken. And then if I just go in here and let's change these colors. Anyone want to give me a fun color to make my header text that will still be enough ratio? I'm gonna do something like pink, because I think pink should be enough.
I was gonna say pink.
Yeah, I think pink should be enough. And then for my body text, I'm going to change this to an off-white. Let's go ahead and go back to the accessibility tab, and let me go back and rerun this. And then, oh, the check still shows up there, but now there's no issues. So I think that's yeah, now there's no issues. That right panel should update. Just technology is not on my side today, but that's okay. So now there's no issues. We've fixed the ratios for these. And then for this X, I'm going to go ahead and create my issue just so I can see my before and after. So I'm going to give this a green background. And then when I go to the accessibility tab and flip it on, now I see that there's not enough contrast. Let me go ahead and bump up. This is the third part of the exercise. Let me go ahead and bump this up. 2 rems might be enough. Let's check. Let's check if that's enough. Go none, and then flip it back on. Okay, so the error is no longer there. So even bumping it up to a couple rems, now there's enough contrast. Okay, and then for our fourth part, the avoid horizontal scrolling. So for this, I'm just going to point out that when I've removed the styles, let me go back to what I had before. So in the styles, these are a couple of attributes to kind of watch out for when you have horizontal text. So this white space no wrap is going to make this whole paragraph display as one line. So removing that would have made the rest of the text flow, and then this hyphens none was preventing the full town name from being able to display. So you'll notice, like by default, without any styles, it's the hyphens auto value, which means that for super long words, hyphens can be inserted into them to break them up, so there's no horizontal scrolling. But something like hyphens none would force it, like, oh, don't have that automatic breaking. So these are just a couple of pointers of like, hey, if you're dealing with horizontal text, look out for your white space and your hyphens. Cool. Next, we're going to talk about images. There's a couple of ways that I want to talk about images. So the first are content images, right? These are images that provide information or context, right? So these are images that are critical for understanding like content in the page, or even setting a tone for something, right? So if you have an image at the beginning of your text that's kind of creating a mood or tone, that's not just decorative. That's setting something for the reader, or it gives some context or tone to the text. So content images as opposed to decorative images. So these are just images that are purely for aesthetics, right? Design flourishes, or images that aren't adding any additional information or tone are decorative. Alt text or alternative text is what we use when an image can't be displayed or seen. And I'm specifically saying displayed or seen. I think seen is pretty obvious, of like, if you're low vision, or if you're blind and you're not able to see an image, right? That makes sense. You're going to rely on alt text for that. But displayed. So most browsers, when an image can't be loaded, most browsers are going to show the alt text. So this is great if like if you're on your phone and you're going in and out of tunnels while you're riding a train, or some other situation where the image isn't able to load, or something happens with your site, with your CMS, with your CDN, and it's not loading the image. In most browsers, they'll show the alt text instead. which is great, right? Because the alt text should convey the same tone or contents that actually seeing the image would. Okay, let's look at some code. So I've got two examples. So this top example is an image with an alt attribute, and this is an example of a content image, right? So the my content.png is a picture of a blue moon. So I've got a little bit of alt text. I would probably include a lot more information than just this, but for the code example, I just want to show like this one's content. And then the one below is a decorative image. So what I can do is just say alt equals empty quote attributes. So I'm providing the alt attribute, but the value is empty. So screen readers and other assistive technologies will know you can skip over this image, it's decorative. What happens if you don't include the alt attribute? It depends, but most browsers or assistive technologies will instead read the source attribute. So if no alt attribute is included, they'll read the source attribute or like the file name of the image. So in this case, like on the bottom case, if I had not included the alt attribute, it would have included decorative. It would have announced something like image decorative PNG, right? That's not good. That's not good at all. A lot of images are going to have a kind of random file names. Maybe there's a UUID of what the file is pointing to. Maybe it's something else that's nonsensical. So that's definitely not good. We always want to provide an alt attribute, and for decorative images, it's fine. It's fine if it's empty. Okay, so for SVGs are another way that we can include images on our page. For the SVG element, there's two things that we're looking at. So first, on line 1, you'll see the role equals image. That's how we tell assistive technology that this is similar to the image element. And then on line 3, you're going to see a title, and that's where we can provide alt text for an SVG. So if we're embedding an SVG into the page, we need the role attribute and the title element to provide alt text. What happens if you don't include these? Who knows? It's the Wild West, right? If you don't have role image and like the title with the alt text, if you have a combination of those, or if you have neither of those, who knows what's going to happen? It depends on browsers. It depends on assistive technologies. So if you have a content SVG, you always want to provide these two. If you have a decorative SVG, completely different attributes you use. So for decorative SVGs, you want the aria hidden equals true attribute and value, and you want focusable equals false for some browsers that need that. So the aria hidden true is going to say, hey, this SVG element, ignore this is hidden. And then some browsers need focusable false to make sure that you can't also give focus, even though it's hidden. Like hidden things could still receive focus with aria hidden. So you need both for some browsers. Let's talk about writing great alt text. So first is be concise. So writing good alt text that's concise but descriptive enough to convey the main purpose or message or content of the image without overwhelming the user with extra information, right? When you're writing alt text for an image, you want to figure out like, what is the content that I'm actually trying to convey, or what is the tone that I'm going to set, right? Because there can be other extraneous details in the image that don't all need to be there, right? You're just trying to convey whatever information is there. You want to avoid redundancy. So when I think about redundancy, I think about if you've got text elsewhere in the page that has the information or the content that you're trying to convey, you don't also have to have that in the alt text, right? Assistive technologies, the user is going to see the other text in the page. So you really want whatever the image is conveying it to be unique to what the image is conveying and not duplicating content that's elsewhere in the page. And then context. Taking context into consideration is key, because the same image in different contexts can require different alt text depending on what you're trying to convey. Here I've got an image which to you, I guess I will describe as it's a cup of water, it's a cup of coffee, and they're on a wooden plate, right? But how you describe this as alt text is going to change depending on what you're trying to convey. So for example, on a cafe like menu page, right? You're trying to convince people to come to your cafe and enjoy your coffee. Maybe you want your alt text to focus on, a cup of latte with intricate art design on top and really like sell your coffee, right? Whereas if you're on a website that is like, maybe this is a side image on like a health website, which is saying like, hey, enjoy your coffee, but also make sure that you hydrate and have a cup of water, right? So maybe you want your alt text to be something like, a refreshing latte paired with a clear glass of water to help hydrate you while you drink coffee, right? So what I'm trying to point out here is depending on the like tone and content that you're trying to convey, you can write completely different alt texts for exactly the same image. You can do an exercise. And actually, you know what? For this exercise, we don't really need the styles. It can still load. Kind of the whole point of this is we are writing alt text. So I will show you the images that you're writing alt text for, and you can use those for reference. So this page, if it had styles, I'm going to be honest, it didn't look that much better than no styles. So maybe Code Sandbox is actually doing me a favor because my design skills are not that great. So I've written up a page with the Bitovi logo at the top, and my page is not about Bitovi, it's about poodles. And I've got a little paragraph explainer about poodles. Let me see if I can bring up the image that you are going to describe. Cool. So let me go back to my HTML and I'll point out the two things. So first, you'll see I've got my image here, and it's pointing to this emoji.png. So I just made a little PNG of the like dog emoji. So that's what that is. I think it's a cute little decorative flourish to the end of this paragraph. If it were loading, it would be cute. And then, but then I've got this image of poodle. This is my dog Jackson. If you hear snoring in my audio, it's because he's laying down behind me. So this is a photo of Jackson at a party, being a party poodle. And then at the bottom here, I've got a little bit of contact information for Bitovi. And to try and finish off my design, I'm putting the Bitovi logo at the bottom. So for this exercise, we want to mark up our images correctly. So we've got a content SVG, we've got a decorative image, we've got a content image, and we've got a decorative SVG. If you provide alt text for things, you might see the alt text for this image. Obviously, the SVG is rendering just fine, but for the image, you might see the alt text in your browser. Let's find our content SVG, decorative image, content image, decorative image. So let's start off with this SVG. So there's the SVG inside an anchor element. So this is actually like conveying information or text, right? Like I read the Bitovi logo, and so we need a label, or not a label, we need a name for this anchor element. We need some text. Just to demo this, I'm going to turn on VoiceOver, which is a screen reader on macOS. I'm going to turn on VoiceOver and give focus to the anchor element, and we'll see what it reads out, and then we'll fix it. So
you are currently on a link. To click this link, press Control, Option, Space.
Okay, so it is good that it read out the link, but that's I think it only read out the link because that's the only information that it had to go on. So you can imagine, like, if it was a much longer link, then it would have read that whole thing out. So we can definitely do better than that and provide some alt text for the SVG. And here I'm going to say that this is role image. And then here I'm going to add a title element, and I'm just going to write Bitovi because that's the information that's being conveyed. So let me go ahead and do that. That should be correct. Let me double check. Awesome.
You are currently on a link. To click this link, press Control, Option, Space.
Thank you, VoiceOver. So when I gave focus to this. It announced that it was a link. It announced that it was an image. So the role image is what helped it there. And then it announced the title element or the alt text that I provided. While we're here, I'm going to go through the other images so I don't have to keep on going back and forth. So I'm going to go to the paragraph and I'm going to give focus to the emoji.png. Okay, so right now it's just announcing image.
Complementary image.
Here, it just announces image.
Content, heading, content, heading, link, image.
And here it just announces image. So like in Firefox, it's not even reading the file names. It's just saying image. So there's no information there. Let's go ahead to our next image, which is the emoji.png. For this emoji, to me, this was just a decorative flair. So I'm going to add an alt attribute and just have it be empty because I don't think it has to be announced. You can see in Firefox, they'll still render the box, but there's no text because there's no alt. So you said ARIA label, and then you said image of a poodle?
Yeah, I think I put image of a cute poodle.
Oh, cute poodle. I love that. That's conveying some like additional like tone or information too, right? Because that was why I included it. He's a cute poodle. Okay, so this is totally valid. So using ARIA attributes is something that you can do to provide alt text, but as much as possible, I think it's either the first or second rule of ARIA is, I think the very first rule of ARIA is don't use ARIA if you don't have to, right? So HTML provides the alt attribute for us to be able to provide the alternative text. So we could use ARIA label, but instead we can use the alt attribute because that's native to HTML. So this is great. So I've got an alt attribute on the poodle with some explanation. Let me see if Firefox renders. Yeah, okay, so you can see that Firefox, what it does is it doesn't even have the placeholder for the image anymore. It just replaces the image with the alt text. So same information is being conveyed. I've got the Bitovi logo again, but for me, I think this was just decorative flair. So here I'm going to add the ARIA attributes of hidden is true, and then I'm going to add focusable equals false. So it can't receive focus in browsers either. So I think I've got everything marked up. I'm going to run through the page in VoiceOver one more time. And I just want to look at like, hey, I can go from the paragraph and it'll skip over the emoji, but then I can give focus and read this alt text. And then down here, I'm going to get to the end of the page and it's going to end on the contact link. And because this is a decorative image.
VoiceOver on Fire, link, head content, end of poodles, heading level 1, poodles.
Okay, so here I can go through the text and let me move
You are
this
currently
over.
on a name, inside of a frame, complementary,
Okay.
end of,
And it's skipping right over the other image.
Complementary. You are currently on a complementary, image of a cute poodle, group.
Right, so I can read, I can see this even though it's not there.
Complement, image, end content, heading level 2, link, end of,
Right, and then it skips right over the SVG because it has no content.
Contact VoiceOver off.
So next, I want to talk about buttons. Buttons, and we're going to talk about links right after this too, right? So the button element, buttons can receive keyboard focus by default. So you're going to hear me say interactive elements a lot if I haven't said it already. So buttons can receive keyboard focus by default. You can activate them with the enter or return or the spacebar or the space keys. They can be used to submit or resubmit or to reset forms. And they have 4 states, the regular like as is button state, but then focus, hover, and active. So focus being when you like if you tab to a button and then the button has focus. Hover if you're using a mouse and you can hover over the button, that's the hover state. And then active means you're actually clicking or pressing on the button, right? So you've hovered over it and then you've started to press or you've tabbed over it and then you're hitting enter on the button. That is the active state. And there is one more state, disabled state. But I would say try not to disable buttons. This is the part where I give my little spiel about how, as much as possible, I think you should never disable buttons. And here's my take. So disabled buttons, if you disable a button, it can't receive focus, which has a bunch of implications. If you have form validation that is activated when the form is submitted, if you're disabling the button, that means that the user is no longer able to see your error messages, right? So if you're doing validation, if you're supposed to be doing validation after like when the form is submitted, if you disable a button, you're removing the user's ability to do that. Another reason is by default, when you submit a form that has errors with any of the inputs, the browser will give focus to the first input that has an error, right? That's a native browser feature. So if you're disabling buttons, you're removing the user's ability to be able to submit and then have their focus be drawn to the first thing that they need to fix in your form. Another reason is if you're a keyboard user and you're like tabbing through your form, maybe you see the disabled button, you think you tab past the last form element to go to that button, but it's disabled, then your focus is going to be given to whatever the next interactive element is. So maybe you're going somewhere else on the page, and you're no longer in the form, you're somewhere else on the page. That's not a great experience for keyboard users. Another for screen reader users. If something is disabled, it can't receive focus, so it's not going to be announced by a screen reader. So screen reader user going through the different form elements, and then they keep going, but they're going to skip right past the disabled button because they can't give focus to it. So they're not even going to know that there's a submit button. They're not going to understand what's going on. Like, you know, they'll have to guess like, oh, something must be wrong with the form. Maybe the form is broken. It's not going to be clear that something else in the form needed to be filled out. So those are all of my cases to you of as much as possible, try not to disable buttons. Let's talk about links. So just a quick comparison to buttons. So they also receive keyboard focus by default. You can activate them with the enter or return key, but not space, right? If you have a focus anywhere else other than a button, when you hit the space bar, then you're going to be going down the page, right? You can kind of scroll page by page going down the page with the space bar. So buttons, when you hit the space bar, you'll activate them. With links, it's just the enter key. They've got one additional state, right? So they have the focus, hover, and active states, but they also have visited. I think it's pretty common, like the default styles are to have links that are blue, and then to, like, once you've gone to a URL and come back, then you're going to see that turn into purple to indicate that it's visited, right? If you're going through a page, you can kind of see, oh, I've clicked on this before, I've looked at this before, and see that visited state. Ambiguous text. So avoid generic text like click here. Okay, so there's actually a bunch of different reasons, right? So some people cite SEO as kind of the foundation of Google. Was originally like, hey, if you have text that you're linking to another resource, they're going to look at that text to understand what that other resource is, and then increase the SEO of that other resource based on the link text that's going to it. So there's SEO benefits in having good link text and not just generic like click here or something like that. A big accessibility benefit is assistive technologies can bring up a list of all the links on a page. Screen reader users frequently won't just start at the beginning of a page and read, you know, line by line going through the page, right? They've got a lot of different tools to be able to navigate to different parts of the page. They can bring up a list of all of the headings and get through the page through the headings, or by landmarks. So if you are using the header elements, the footer elements, the main elements, the aside elements, if you're using the nav element, if you're using these landmark elements, they're going to be able to navigate to specific parts of the page based on the landmarks. Another is links. So screen reader user can bring up a list of all of the links on the page. Here's the catch. If all your links are click here, they're going to have no idea like, oh, which link is going to this thing. Like, I know that they linked to something and I want to go to that. You know, I've read further down the page and I want to go and follow that link. But if everything is click here, when they bring up that index of links, there's no way to tell which link is going to be which. For a bunch of different reasons, you want to avoid ambiguous text like click here. Let's do a quick compare. We already talked about buttons trigger actions and you activate with enter in space. Links, the big thing here is that you're going somewhere, right? Buttons do things, links go places. They're either going to another page or they're going somewhere else on the same page if you're linking to an anchor on the page, but links, you're going places, and buttons, you're doing things. Links are only enter key, and then with links, you can copy and paste them, you can share them, you can do stuff right with them, right? Because they're going places. And then I already mentioned that screen readers can index all links on the page, which is not the case with buttons, and is not useful for buttons, right? But for links, we want to go places. Exercise time. So this is what the exercise looks like. What I've got, I'm just going to inspect this to kind of show the DOM and show the preview. I've got a paragraph with link and then some additional information in paragraph. Got another paragraph that has a link. And this time it's a link, but I've styled it to look like a button. Now, in general, I think that things should look like the things that they are. In general, an element should look like the thing that it is. This is a pretty common pattern though, and I think it's common enough that, you know, users are familiar with, hey, it looks like a button, it's a large call to action or a CTA. So we're gonna have it be a link because it's going somewhere, right? It's not doing an action, it's going places. So we're gonna have it be a link, but we're gonna style it as kind of to look like a button. So it, you know, grabs your attention and it's clear like, hey, here's the next place that we wanna take you. And then here I've got a div, and I think someone mentioned the dialogue element in the chat. I love that you did. Because I'm using it in this exercise. So I've got a div with an on-click handler that calls show modal, and then I've got a dialogue element. Let me go ahead and click on this. So it'll open up the dialogue. It's pretty simple. It's got a header and a close button, which you can see if I open it up. This close button is another div with an on-click handler, and that can close the dialog. Our exercise is these three things at the top of the HTML file. So we want to improve the text that's used for links. We want to add styles for different element states. So you can see the CSS here that I've got. It's just the button styles, but none of the other focus, hover, active states, none of the other states. And then number three, we want to replace our div elements with something that's more semantic. Number one, improve the text used for a link. Okay, so for this one, it's got an anchor element with click here and then the rest of the text. So I think there's a couple of ways to work with this. So I definitely don't want to just have click here, right? The ambiguous text. So something I could do is I can take this and make it Batovi Academy, and then kind of reword my sentence a little bit. So now this reads, level up your front-end skills with courses on Batovi Academy. Let's go ahead and look at what that looks like. I really like this, right? I like this link text because, well, one, it's not click here, but two, it's telling you the resource that you're going to, and it's naming it. So if in my screen reader, I bring up a list of links and I remember, oh, I saw a link to Batovi Academy, let me go back to that. That name is going to be really clear. There's definitely other ways that you could rephrase or rework this. This is probably my favorite. Number two, add styles for other element states. Let's have some fun. I'm gonna get started with hover styles because they do have an order, and I think hover should usually come first. For button hover, when I hover over the button, I want to add some flair. For this one, I think I'm gonna start off with a box shadow just for fun. And let me see if I can remember the syntax. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, cool. So I've added on hover, I've added this box shadow. So when I hover over it now, I'm getting like a little reaction with the button. I see like, oh, I'm hovering over it. So this is good. Also, while I'm doing this, you'll notice I added this cursor auto, but when I'm hovering over the link, it's not changing my mouse cursor to be the little like pointy guy. So I'm going to remove that. And now I get that feedback too. So I've got my mouse cursor changing, and I've got some styles to really emphasize it.
So I got some styles for you, Jason, if you want.
Okay. Yes.
So
yes.
I'm a preface this with how I came up with these.
Okay.
I asked our favorite robots to give me CSS for focus and hover states on a button, make them perfectly accessible, but also make them really annoying. And,
really annoying. Oh dear.
And this is what I got.
Oh dear. Okay, so this is interesting input. I'm gonna take a look at what Andrew's put in the chat. So I like that it's got cursor pointer. That is the default. It's added it's added transitions, which I don't think we'll have time to talk about today. But if I had transitions, oh, it had annoying keyframes. Okay, I just want to call out with the transition, I would want to make sure that I respect the prefers reduced motion media query. We're not going to have time to talk about that today, but anytime that I'm adding a transition, I want to add prefers reduced motion. So I'm either only adding the transition if motion's fine, or I'm removing the transition if the user prefers reduced motion. So I'm going to give it a minus on that. What else did the robot say? So hover, it changed it to yellow. Background, yellow. Oh, that's not what I want. It's a hover state, but I would definitely like, now the text isn't readable, so I would follow that up with like a color black so that we still have contrast, right? So that's a bit intense, but that's fine for hover states. What did it do for focus? So it suggested outline none. Okay, so outline none, but you're providing the box shadow. So that seems fine. I think I already have outline none on my button. So for the box shadow, I'm going to see what it came up with. 0, 0, 5 pixels, 2 pixels, and then, oh, yellow again. Okay, so that's interesting. So when I tab over, is the syntax wrong? I'm going to do what I did just for comparison. Okay, the syntax. Oh, I typed it wrong. Okay, so let's see if that works now. Okay, that's something. My button's starting off red. So I think there's what I would want to double check on this is the contrast between the yellow and the red to make sure that it's like clear enough that there's focus. So I'm gonna go back. No, I'm gonna go back to what I had before, just because I think it gives it a little bit more pop. Okay, and then what else did it do? Okay, so it didn't even include the active state, which is why we don't rely on these robots for accessibility.
No, we do not. I didn't ask it for that. I did say be accessible, but
and that one. You know, it's a good point of like, you know, I like to use LLMs for helping me with different stuff. I've asked it stuff about accessibility, and it's basically always wrong in some way. So like in this example, it didn't give you any active states for your button, which you would absolutely want to have. I've seen some research that maybe 25 to 50% of accessibility issues are detectable by tooling. And if that's the case, it also emphasizes to me like, well, if only 25 to 50% can even be detected, then like the minority definitely can't be fixed either, right? So I think this is a really strong case for you need to have the knowledge, you need to do usability testing, you need to come to trainings like these and learn more, because we can't depend on potentially our future robot overlords to get accessibility correct.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so button active. Let's do. I'm gonna give it an outline. Let me give it 3 pixel green solid. Let's see what that does. Okay, so I've got my focus state. I've got my hover state. When I click on the button, so I'm activating it. Now I've got my green outline, so I can kind of see it. Let me do all three. So giving focus, hovering over it, and activating it. My box shadow and my outline kind of like conflict or don't look great together. This is not the best design, but hey, it works. I've got all of my states covered, and they're definitely visible. And then this third, replace the div elements with more semantic and usable elements. So for this one, I'm going to take my divs and I'm going to change them to buttons. What this gets me, so my div before, I just want to kind of show this off. So my div before that just had on click. Now when I try and tab to it, it can't receive focus, right? So for this, I would need to add a tab index of 0 to kind of add it to the tab order. So now I have it in the tab order, but I'm missing other stuff too, right? So it's a button, but by default, there's no additional states that give me feedback of like focus, hover, active. Also, this on click means I can click on this to activate it. But if I tab over to it, like I'm hitting the return key and I've got nothing, right? I hit the spacebar key, I've got nothing. So I'd have to add even more attributes to handle these things. Instead, I'm just going to replace this with a button. And I'm going to do the same thing here. All right, so now I've got a button that looks like a button. I can hit return key, and then I've got this button that looks like a button. Dialogue element is pretty cool that it will give focus to the first interactive elements in the dialogue. So this is the first and only, but this is the first interactive element. So it automatically gives focus to my button, and then I can hit enter and it'll give focus back to the element that opened the dialogue. So that I feel like that's a real win for just using the native dialogue element, and you've got all of this stuff for free. One other thing, this isn't related to accessibility, but I just like the dialogue element. On this button, I have an on click to close it. Because it's in a form method is dialogue, I can remove that on click and I can still close the dialogue. So the browser knows like, hey, in this button is to close the dialogue. It's wrapped in this. So when I hit enter or hit spacebar, click on it, it's going to close the dialogue, which that's not accessibility, but I think it's pretty cool. To wrap up, I want to talk about why incorporating accessibility throughout your development process and trying to shift to left on accessibility to be earlier in the process is valuable. But first, I want to talk about why we don't use accessibility like widgets or overlays. These widgets are said to add accessibility into your site. You've probably been on a site where in the bottom right, there's like an accessibility icon. And when you click on that, you get an overlay or you get some additional UI to add accessibility to your page. These tools, they do not add accessibility to your page. And I kind of want to go through that. So number one problem, or like the first problem that I want to talk about is there's no guarantee that users can activate them, right? there's no guarantee that a user would actually be able to reach the button to be able to add the accessibility to the page. The reason for that is like if you've got other issues where you've got a keyboard trap for keyboard nav user, or you've got something, you've got maybe the widget is the first thing in the page, but you've got something else with a higher tab index that's going to receive focus first. Or if you got the widget added to the bottom of the page, so the user would have to try and get through the entire page before they even realize the widget. Or a number of different ways where a user might not even be able to reach the thing to activate them. So that doesn't help the underlying accessibility. I mentioned this before, but I want to emphasize it. So automated tools can only detect and fix a minority of issues, right? At best, we're looking at closer to 50% of things can be automatically detected. I think that's a very high number. I think it's closer to like a quarter or a third of issues can be automatically detected. And it's awesome that tools can detect some issues, right? We saw in Firefox's DevTools that it can look for color contrast issues. And that's a real boon. But for things like is the language written clearly so people can understand, or are all of the button states there and they're also accessible and easy to see, like a litany of different things that can't be detected automatically by tooling, and certainly can't be fixed by tooling, right? Like if we can't detect them, we definitely can't fix them. A lot of these tools will have adjustments like increasing the font size or decreasing the font size, or having high contrast or not. Or I see that some tools don't work well, like dark mode switchers just don't work on some websites. Maybe the tool says that it can be switched to dark mode, but all it's doing is trying to like invert colors or something like that, which one, who knows if that's going to work with the content, but two, the like browsers and operating systems have tools for stuff like high contrast mode on Windows, or various like reducing transparency or reducing motion, or light mode, dark mode. So things like font size or color, these sort of things are already provided by operating systems and browsers, and don't need to be duplicated in these tools, and they can just mess up what the browser or the operating system can do natively. For developers, right, if you've got a widget in your sites, then you can be fighting against the tool if you're developing, right? These widgets can introduce new issues by modifying your original code that then you don't have any control over. There's no legal protection either, right? Sites with these widget overlays regularly get sued. So the companies may say that they provide some guarantee of not being sued or not losing lawsuits, but it's simply not true. You can be sued with these overlays too. That was a bunch of bad stuff about the widgets, but I'm going to shift to the good and exciting parts of building accessibility earlier into your process. This is kind of going back to like the business, kind of the business side, right? I think we have an ethical responsibility, but let's just talk about it from a business side, right? It's definitely more cost effective to build accessibility into your process, and it helps avoid costly retrofits. So I worked with a client 3 or 4 years ago, loved the client, loved that I was working on a project with them where we were fixing some accessibility issues in their application. This was kind of like a back of house application. And the need for this project came from both having their employees using their tool and employees with disabilities not being able to use the tool. But also it came from the customer support agents using the tool wanted to be able to navigate through the website faster. So they wanted to focus on just on using their keyboard to be able to go through and filling out forms and that sort of thing faster. And their website wasn't easily navigable by keyboard. So the two things I want to highlight in that story is that one, having me come in to go through all of their components and fix things, worthwhile for them to do, but way more costly than it would have been for them to incorporate accessibility into their design and development process earlier on, so things didn't have to be reworked and retrofitted. Second thing I want to highlight in that story is that accessibility benefits everyone. They came with a need of needing to make their tool accessible to their employees, but also is a huge benefit to their customer support agents that just wanted to take advantage of accessibility features to be more efficient. Efficiency. This is, I say efficiency across the board. It goes from working with product designers and having the accessibility built in from the very beginning means that things are going to be more clearly communicated with developers so that later down the process, you don't have to go back and fix things or what have you. So shifting left on accessibility can make your whole team more efficient and being able to deliver features and bug fixes faster. Broader audience. Accessibility being user-centered design, right? It benefits everyone. You can have a broader audience of, accessibility being for customers who are only on their mobile phones, right? So being able to adapt the styles, that falls under accessibility, or being able to reach more customers with specific disabilities, that falls under having a broader audience. Okay, so how do you do it? How do you do it earlier, right? How do you shift left? It starts with collaborating with product designers. So if you're a developer working with a UI UX team or with product designers, it means having conversations with them when you first pick up work to understand like, hey, is this meeting, what I know of accessibility, is this meeting the success criteria? As a project manager, I think that means if you're a product owner and you are building for your customers, it means understanding your customers' needs and then having that be an initial conversation with your UI UX team or your product designers to make sure that accessibility is baked into those initial requirements and those initial conversations. Developers choosing tools that market accessibility. There's a lot of different NPM packages and modules that we can use to make our lives easier, and thinking about accessibility and looking for tools that market accessibility is something that they care about. Means that code that you're not even writing but you are taking on as a dependency, if you're choosing tools that market themselves as accessible, that means at least they're trying, right? They're going to be open to, if you find any issues, they're going to be open to receiving pull requests to fix those issues, and they're putting thought into it. Use semantic HTML. That was a lot of what we covered today, right? We had just the littlest bit of ARIA and JavaScript and really focus on semantic HTML and CSS as our foundation, including accessibility in code reviews. So as a developer, if you're working with a team, think about how you can include accessibility in your code reviews. If you have a checklist for code reviews, see what you can add to that checklist when you're doing code reviews and have that be part of a conversation. Also, sometimes I feel like it can be hard to articulate exactly why something should be a specific way. And I feel like accessibility and design stuff can be a real boon to being like, hey, we want to do it this other way because this makes our site more accessible, or we want to write this code a certain way because it's going to make the design better. So building that into your code review process and thinking about accessibility as you're looking at code, I think can kind of lift everyone up. And then usability testing. I really wish we had time to talk about this more, but testing with customers, like actually putting designs and prototypes in front of customers, but also even before you release stuff, trying to validate things with actual users and finding those issues earlier is really good. I want to mention a couple of additional resources. I mentioned WCAG. So the W3C's WCAG documentation has, it is the resource for. Here is all of the success criteria for making your site accessible. So definitely check out the WCAG. The initial WCAG text can kind of be a bit much, but they include explainers of how to reach each success criteria in plain English. That is much more easier to understand. So don't be afraid by the initial success criteria. they do have explainers that make it a lot easier to consume. We only touched on ARIA a little bit today. ARIA is the Accessible Rich Internet Applications specification. It basically says, like, we want to use semantic HTML as our base for whatever HTML doesn't provide, then we can use ARIA to fill in any semantics. So the ARIA authoring practices are a guide for how to integrate ARIA into your application. So again, semantic HTML is your base. You want to be selective about using ARIA for things, but there are things that you need to use. The ARIA authoring practices guide practices like guides and sample code for, hey, if you've got a tab components, or you've got an autocomplete, or you're building your own modal or something like that. It can be a real resource for understanding the practices. WebAIM, they have a bunch of resources, but also a bunch of information about accessibility, how to build things well, testing with customers, all that jazz. So they're one of my go-to resources for accessibility. So with that, I want to leave you with a couple closing thoughts. You heard me say it multiple times. Accessibility is user-centered design. I really believe this. Like, everything in accessibility falls under user-centered design, and you can kind of think about your design choices with accessibility in mind. And the earlier you think about it, the better, right? It starts with the product design choices and decisions that you make, and then it carries through the development process and how we work with customers. Last is accessibility is a journey. So today I presented you with my best effort, my best knowledge of best practices. Accessibility is a journey for all of us though, right? So I hope today gave you a little bit of inspiration to be like, hey, I want to learn more about this. I kind of want to dig into accessibility a little bit more. It starts with the semantic HTML and CSS foundation, but just grows from there in tech and in design. I hope this is a good start to your accessibility journey.